Hi, welcome back. I am very excited to talk to you about an unusual duology. And I say unusual because it wasn't meant to be a duology. And it is written by an amazing artist named Nic Stone. And some of you may have already heard of the first book and perhaps the second. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dear Martin by Nic Stone, and then her surprising companion book that came after, Dear Justice. So let's talk first about Dear Martin. First of all, I want to let you know that both of these books are contemporary or realistic fiction. It means that it could take place anywhere, any time right now. And it just so happens that these books both take place in Georgia. And a lot of Nic Stone's books actually do take place in Georgia, which is where she lives. And it's a place that she knows well. And a lot of times you will hear people say, if you like to write, write what you know. And Nic Stone is excellent at doing that. Protagonists of both of these books are young African American men who come from, I'm just going to hold them both up while I describe this, who really come from similar background. I feel like I want you guys to face each other, so I'm going to do this. What I love about these books is that both Justice, and Justice is right here, even though it says Martin on it, and Quan, who writes to Justice in this one, come from the same neighborhood. They come from the same place, and yet their opportunities and their options are very different. And yet they end up finding themselves in a situation, in situations, that a lot of young African American men find themselves in our country. So let me go ahead and start off with our friend, Justice. So Justice is the first book that Nic Stone wrote, and totally Google, look up Nic Stone. And she does a brilliant job in her author's note as well as in online in several interviews of explaining what inspired her to write about Dear Martin. And she's as eloquent speaking as she is with her words. And so Dear Martin came about because she was really thinking about the state of what's happening with a lot of young African American men when it comes to police. And I could cite lots of statistics. I could go into research. But one thing that we know that is true is that a lot of African American men, like when they're kids, there are studies that show that you could be 12 years old as a young Black male, and most people will think that you are 5 years older than that. And so a lot of times your childhood is robbed from you because that is how you are seen. So one of the things that's important to note in this book is that I feel, and as I'm a white woman, so I don't have anything to stand upon except what I know from students and people that I love who are Black and are young, is this very much captures emotion, very raw, very real. So let's talk about Justice and what happens in Dear Martin. Now, Dear Martin, okay, is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And Justice grows up in a really tough neighborhood. And he has this very rare opportunity because he is an excellent student and quite intelligent to win a scholarship at a preparatory school. And he loves it. He loves the challenges, and he has incredible opportunities, but also understand that the school that he goes to, he doesn't necessarily blend in as well, because most of the people who go there are paying, and they are from very much upper class white families. So he's one of the few people who are of color at this school. But he learns so much, and he has a really great teacher. I do want to point out an African-American professor, Doc. I have to call him a professor because I feel like even more than a teacher, he's just like that man, right? Who's this guiding beacon. And some of the things that Justice loves to do is he's on the debate team, and he's good. He is so good. Like, other people may have to like prep and work at it, but he's just like, he's got the voice for it. You know, he's got the mind for it, just organizing right there on the fly. And he's doing well. Okay. But then one night, right in the beginning of the book, he gets a call from an ex. She's drunk, she can't drive. So he goes over, tries to help her out, and she is light-skinned, okay? And he finds himself in a situation where he's in handcuffs. Doesn't matter what he says, doesn't matter how polite he is, doesn't matter any of this. He suddenly finds himself in this horrible situation where just because he can say the right things and do the right things and dress the right way, he is profiled. And it really affects him. And he starts writing letters to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dear Martin. And he starts writing more and more about some of the experiences he goes through. And really, it's a diary. Sometimes just a diary. Like, man, this is what my day was like. And he's trying to work through some things. And it's because a couple years ago, he did a project on Dr. King. And he feels like he understands his teachings. And he's trying to find a way of being nonviolent, of being understanding, of showing empathy, and working through this. But then something huge happens in his life. And although it tells you right here on this book flap, I'm not going to tell you, okay? Because I want you to pick this up, either ebook, your public library. I want you, in your hands, I want you to pick this up. Because another incident happens, and it's not just, man, I've been profiled, I'm in handcuffs. We're talking life-changing. And in writing to Martin, it's just not doing it. It's not enough. There's not enough answers for this. So how do you move forward? Even when you get an opportunity like Justice does, and I have to say to Nic Stone, what a name to pick. It's a beautiful name. Justice spelled Y-C-E, and we're talking about justice. How do you find the justice? Even when you're given the opportunity as a young Black male in the United States, when you're not seen as an individual, and because of institutions that we have set in place. So this is the story. And he is connected to the individual in the next book. And he goes and sees him. And the individual in the next book we're going to talk about, I'm going to bring up right now. But definitely check out Dear Martin. Now, you don't need to read both of these books, but I feel your experience is more enriched when you do. So I recommend it. But both of them are complete books on their own. So let us talk about Dear Justice. Okay? And so we're talking about Vernell Quan. He does not go by Vernell. He goes by, and he's a junior, but he goes by Quan. Quan, same neighborhood. Oh, and both him and Justice were in like a gifted and talented honors kind of math class. Quan is bright. He's intelligent. But his arrangement's a little bit different. And one of the things I forgot to mention here in Dear Martin is Justice has this mom. Again, we got some interesting family arrangements, and by that I mean for Justice, okay, for Justice, it's his mom taking care of everything. All right, she's taking care of everything, but she is there and she's working and she's pushing. For Quan, his parents aren't together, okay, and this is, I think, a pretty typical thing for a lot of us. But his dad lives in a really nice part of the town. His mom, not so much. His mom has 2 other kids by another man. And this man, he's got some great names for him. And you'll read this and find out. But this man is not a good person. Okay. He is abusive. And he's abusive to Quan too. But that abuse isn't too bad as long as Quan's dad is in the picture. Because he don't want to mess with Quan's dad. But the problem is that Quan's way, his father's way of making a living isn't legal. Okay, he is involved with drugs. But he is a good person. And one of the things I appreciate about this book too is you start to realize the opportunities that are available, especially for a lot of the black men in this book are limited from where they live and the educational opportunities they have. Quan is aware, once he's older, a little bit older, of what his father does. And he ends up getting arrested. And once Quan's father is out of his life, the center drops out. Quan, 4th grade, doing great. And there's this chance. I just want them facing each other. There's this chance meeting where the two of them meet at this great playground with a rocket ship. I can just imagine it. When I was a kid, there was this playground with this rocket ship. And they both like to go to the top of this rocket ship just to get away, right? With Quan, it's to get away from some of the horrible things happening in his mom's place. And that's when they first meet. And Quan's doing great. He's doing great. He's doing great. His dad is gone. And now he is stuck with this man in his mother's life. And his mother, well, this man, doesn't necessarily always bring him money, but sometimes he does. And she's got these kids. And, if you've never been in an abuse cycle, I have. Sometimes it's difficult to be outside of it and to see it and to know how to leave it. His mom is trapped. So that means Quan and his younger siblings are too. And there are times when they're hungry. And so Quan resorts to stealing, to lifting some stuff from the corner store. Because his mom's not always aware. Or his mom's locked in the room because she can't work because she's so hurt. And so now we see Quan start falling when it comes to his academics. Okay, and that's when we're talking about opportunities. And as somebody who works in schools, I know that a lot of times when you live in an abusive situation, you don't go talk about this, or you don't talk about that you're hungry. You deal with it, and that's what Quan tries to do. And slowly he tries to deal with this till one day he gets caught lifting. Immediately, jail. Now, what you start to learn in this book, and again, it's fiction, but it really mirrors reality in so many ways, is that his sentences for the small things that he does greatly outweigh some of the crimes that people who are not of color face. So, for example, he ends up getting like a prison sentence that's like 3 times as long as a young white man who attempts to kill his stepfather, stabbing him. This guy's out like in 3 months, and Quan's in there for a year for stealing some food. I mean, it's ludicrous. But Quan figures out real quick how the system is stacked against him. And so one of the times that he's brought in, I think it's only the second time that he's brought into court. He's called a career criminal. That he's not even 14 yet. And you start to see where Quan's doors of opportunity are being shut. Until finally, one of the times when he's out, he makes a friend who is part of what we would call the gang. But for him, it's a family. Because he sure doesn't have one at home. His mom is too busy making excuses to stay with the person she's with, and he sees an opportunity to be able to make money to make sure that his younger siblings are okay. And for the first time, he has somebody reach out to him, and a friend Trey, and then man Martel, who takes care of everyone. But see, people who actually care, people who actually ask, how are you, Quan? How are you? You okay? Now, see, when we look at Dear Martin, when we look here at Justice all along, he has not just his mom who's there, right? But he has Doc. He has this wonderful teacher, this professor who inspires him, enlightens him. He has support of people who care, including a young woman who's his best friend, and her parents who delight in seeing him. Just, how you doing? What's going on? He has people who are there and support him. And Quan doesn't. Same neighborhood, same neighborhood. He did not, of course, get an opportunity to go into some prestigious school. He's locked into the school systems that they're in, which aren't as great. And once he starts getting in and out of jail, well, school's not in the picture anymore. But Martell finds out that he's got he's got a brain designed for math. And so he starts to handle all of the, the log sheets and the balance and the money and so forth for the drug trade they're doing. Now, you already find out in Dear Martin with Justyce, because Justyce goes to visit Quan, that Quan is in prison for killing a police officer. In fact, he is in prison for killing the very police officer that arrested him for trying to help his ex-girl. She was drunk. Justyce offers Quan something that he hadn't had offered to him in a while, which is somebody who actually stopped by and listened. So he starts exchanging letters, just like the Dear Martin ones. Yeah, with Justyce. So you get the Dear Justyce coming in here. But you start to really find out about Quan. Is Quan who we think he is when we start reading Dear Martin? Is he involved in this world of drugs in the way that we think he is? What are the opportunities? What were the circumstances when it came to this actual shooting? Did he even do it? Is he still being profiled just the same way the Justyce was in Dear Martin? Watch what happens in this book when you see what happens when Justyce and the support system he's always had gets involved in helping Quan. Now, I want to hold up both these books again the right way, where they're facing each other. I love this. Look at this. Oh, that's the beauty. This graphic design. I can't even hold this even because I don't know what's going on in my life. But just look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Beauty of graphic design. I love this. Dear Justyce, Dear Martin. There's a communication going on between these young men and the past and today about things that are happening in our world right now that I think are very important, not just for young African American men to hear, but for all people to hear. Because oftentimes I think it's very easy, you hear Black Lives Matter and people may have a definite opinion about this. Well, why isn't all lives matter? Okay, that's something I've heard before too. And I think there's certainly definite opinions about what does it mean to be a young Black man, right, in this country. And Dear Martin and Dear Justyce can help tell you that. I want to thank Nic Stone for sharing these. And I also want to add that Dear Justyce came about, this unusual duology is what I call it, because she had young men that she met because of Dear Martin, who said, you know, we love Justyce. We loved hearing this and what happened to him. But you know who we are? We're more like the Quans. We want to hear more stories about us. And she did mention in her author's note this was a little bit harder for her to write. And in some ways, it didn't feel like fiction. And as somebody, as an educator who has worked with people of color for most of my career, and as somebody who grew up in a city where most of the people I knew were of color, I can certainly say that if I rode in a car with them outside of our city, we were treated very differently until we got pulled over and they saw me in the car. And there is something to be said about hearing a story of what it is like, even if it is fictionalized, and hearing the stories of those of people who are existing and real. And it is a value to understand what is happening in our society today. So I highly recommend reading Dear Martin and Dear Justyce to everybody. I want to thank Nic Stone for listening to her readers and giving us Quan. Thank you for giving us Quan as well, as Dear Martin. And I hope that you pick these up, and I hope you enjoy them. And until then, I wish you happy reading and good health. Thank you.